Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, B.J. Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast, a place where we journey through the incredible world of organ transplantation. I am your host, B.J. Odom. Each week we uncover inspiring stories. We meet extraordinary individuals who are connected to the world of transplants. Remember to support us by leaving that 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Don't forget to join us on Facebook, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. And if you have a story you'd like to share, just send us an email, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Join us this week for episode 29 as we delve into the incredible journey of Mark Rodriguez, a double lung transplant survivor, motivational speaker, and author of the inspiring book, Just Breathe and Believe. Discover the hope and the drive that carries Mark through his transplant journey as he shares valuable tips on staying positive in life. Mark's story is one of resilience and courage as he defies the odds with not one, but 2 lung transplants. Let us say good morning, Mark, and tell us just a little bit about yourself to start things off.
I have a double lung transplant. My first transplant was October 11th of 2011, and my second was January 24th of 2016. And I am also known as the lung transplant stonemason. In 2020, I returned back to my career in my craft of stonemasonry after 2 double lung transplants as the world's only stonemason to ever do so. And in last year, in 2023, I began traveling the country and speaking, doing motivational speaking. I am now an author and a transformational empowerment coach. And I am just amazed at how many gifts are wrapped up in the gift of life. And that initial gift of life that we receive, you know, as we go through this journey, how more and more gifts just keep revealing themselves and unraveling. It's just amazing.
All those speaking engagements, you must be keeping pretty busy there, my man.
Well, I try to. Wherever they'll have me and wherever God wants me to go is where I'm going. I'm also still doing some stonework jobs, some stonemasonry. I just finished up a hearth and a mantle for a fireplace yesterday. And busy getting my book out, which will be, it's going to slated for the second week of November to be released. It's called Just Breathe and Believe. And then working with clients, trying to help people begin to help themselves by changing their thoughts, their words, which will change the way they move in the world, and it changes their character, and that's how we change our mindset.
Now, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that book then, because it sounds quite interesting what you're doing here.
Yeah, well, it's called Just Breathe and Believe. And the breathe part of it is actually an acronym I came up with out of a meditation. And it stands for believe relentlessly every time you're attempting tasks of healing and enlightenment. Just breathe. And for me, the scariest thing I ever experienced was not being able to breathe. It's almost like you're drowning on the land. It's terrifying.
I can
and
only
I've been
imagine
through.
it'd be kind of like drowning, you would think.
It's like I said, it's like drowning on the land. You're doing everything you can to try to get air, and you can't.
Wow.
And it's if you think about breathing, it's the first thing we did when we left our mother's womb and entered this world. It's the last thing we will do before we leave. And I equate it to something I learned about a conversation that Moses had with the Creator. And the Creator, he asked the Creator, "What's your name?" And the Creator said, Y-H-W-H. And, with our propensity to use vowels, we added an A and an E in there. And some people call him Yahweh. Well, these letters, when paired together, are the only letters in the English alphabet that you cannot touch your lips or move your tongue when you sound them out. And when you sound them out, don't they sound like this?
Oh, wow.
And that's breathing.
No kidding.
That's breathing. That's the first thing we did when we came into this life is breathe. We said God's name. The last thing we will do is breathe before we leave this earth and say God's name. And so whenever I'm in trouble, I just focus on my breathing. And that's like I'm inviting God into my experience to guide me, to give me the answers, guide me towards the solutions, keep me away from making those choices that will only further to weaken me, which are anger, frustration, stress, and eventually depression. Those are not things that are mentioned in the Word. And so if they're not in the Word, they're not of God. And if they're not of God, then they're of the enemy. And sometimes we forget that things like anger and stress and all those things I just mentioned are not automatic steps in the process when something occurs. Those are choices. Much like the choices that some people, when they're going through things, they may choose alcohol or drugs. But the thing about the alcohol and drugs, the people that choose those, eventually they're going to stop. They're going to run out of money, or they're going to have too much and pass out, or whatever the case is, they'll stop. But the people that are choosing anger and stress repeatedly, they don't know how to stop, and that becomes their default for everything. And then you end up very, very sick. You go to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Well, we can't find anything that's wrong with you." And then they start calling it this mystery illness. But really, when we give our bodies these signals through our thoughts and words, there's chemical reactions that take place in our bodies. And so with every word there's a flip word to that. So for me, when people say stress, I know that the reaction that the body has is like it tenses up, it freaks out, it's time to start freaking out, and it sends out this very negative chemical reaction. Well, for me, that flip word to that stress is challenged. So when I say challenged, I'm challenged, or this is challenging me, my body, because we don't challenge our bodies enough, or our minds for that matter. When I say this, my body and my mind are like, wait a minute, what? What did he say? Challenge? Wait, we have a challenge? Yeah, challenge! And it sends out this very different, positive and powerful chemical reaction. So most of it is in our thoughts and our words.
So now, do you have an answer, like when people are stressed or angry, that can help them overcome the mode that they have at the present time?
Just recognizing that it's a choice, first of all, and it's not an automatic thing that has to happen. You're choosing it. So if you can choose that, then you can choose something else. You can choose stepping back and not being so reactionary. You can choose stepping back and seeking counsel or seeking advice or seeking clarity.
Now,
So if there's a choice for one, you have a choice that's going to hurt you, you also have a choice that's going to help you. There's a flip side to everything, is my point. And so for every word, there's a flip word. And if it's a negative word, find the flip word, because that's going to be the positive one, and focus on that. And that's more challenging. It's harder to do that. It's easy to focus on the negatives because the negatives are so prevalent. But when we get sick, that's when we really have to focus on any little positives there are, because those are the ones that are going to grow. And if we don't magnify the negatives and don't amplify them, then those will eventually begin to shrink. It's what we feed. It's like our brain is the most powerful thing we have, but it depends on what we feed it. It could be our greatest ally or our worst enemy.
Now, I know when I had a heart and I had a kidney transplant, and I had, difficulties even as a child with health issues. And I guess I always believed in the two things. One, keep a positive attitude, because that's going to help you more than going into the situation with a negative attitude. So the positive attitude, very important. And I always believed also is, like the people, like the nurses and the doctors. And I've heard it so many times being in the hospital, someone will lash out at the doctors or yell at the nurses or even the techs. And they're all there to help and protect you. And when you're, I don't know. I just think when you're pushing your way through in a negative way, especially with illnesses, that's not going to help the outcome that you're looking for. Because obviously you want to walk out of there being healthier and better than you were.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that everything is energy. Even when we're in a compromised state with our health, energy still plays a huge role. And everything that we think and speak, when emitted, there's energy attached to it. And we have to understand that whatever energy that we are emitting with our thoughts and words is the same energy that we will draw back to us. But it's not a one-to-one exchange. Whatever we put out there comes back to us multiplied. And with the ferocity or the passion that we put it out there with is the amount that it's going to come back multiplied. And the thing about lashing out at the people that are trying to help you is not only does it affect their efforts, but it affects your ability for your own body to start healing itself. When you are surrounded in negativity and it's emitting from your core, like, how's anything supposed to get better around that? And so until we change our energy and the way that we direct it and the way that we put it out there in the universe, and our health is not going to change, and our outlook is certainly not going to change. And when we're compromised medically and with our health, it's so hard to find things to be grateful for. It is so hard to find the one little tiny positive thing that's kind of drowning in a sea of negative things. But you have to find it. You have to seek it, and you have to magnify it, because that's the only way that it's going to multiply and grow and have the kind of effect that you need it to have. And so, for me, when I first got sick, I looked at my life and I said, wow, Mark, you don't have a lot of tallies on the good side, and you got a whole lot of tallies on the kind of the bad side. And if you're going to go see your maker soon, you better figure this out, dude, because the balance is way off. The scales are way off. And admittedly, I started helping people out when I was at my worst. because of that. And it came from a very selfish point of view. But once I realized that it needed to be from a selfless point of view, then that's when the real power started like having its effect. As I was helping each person, not expecting anything back and not expecting, the scales to be balanced, just doing it because it's the right thing to do.
So would you say
that's
then
when it started giving me the things I needed to continue in my journey?
So would you
because
say
it's all energy?
So would you say though, like when you went into your transplant, and did you go in the beginning kind of negative and learning that you needed this positive to come out on the other end? Is that where your journey led you to where you are today?
No, actually it started before that, because I said to myself, listen, if you're gonna, and I thought about this very deeply. I said, if you're waiting for your second chance, those lungs might not come. Like, you're already on your second chance because you're still here with an opportunity to get to that day. Your second chance already started. But if you're waiting for the lungs, if you think that's when your second chance starts, like, you're missing the boat. Okay. You're already on your second chance because you have an opportunity to get to that day. Don't wait for the lungs, because they might not come, and then you're going to miss out on things between now and then, right? So I said to myself, my second chance already started because I have an opportunity. If you don't have an opportunity, then there's no chance, right?
Right. Wow, that's a very good philosophy that you have, I must admit.
And I said to myself, like, I could say my second chance will start when I get the lungs, but that wasn't the reality of it. I would have wasted so much, and I would have lost out on so much if I would have waited for that day. I didn't wait for that day to say I have my second chance, and then I started doing things because of that.
Now, how long?
Which led me.
So then how long was it before you knew you needed a transplant and you got your transplant, that you had to, like, your mountain? How long did it take you to get over your mountain, if I can ask? Or are you still working on it?
I got diagnosed in October of 2010. I got my first transplant in October of 2011. So for 1 year, I was fighting for my life. I was on oxygen, and actually this fight led down to my last couple of days, because had I not got the transplant, I wouldn't have lasted more than a couple more days. I was 8% lung function. They didn't even know how I survived as long as I did. But I didn't get listed until August of 2011. And then I got my call in October of 2011.
Okay.
So from that time from October of 2010 to August of 2011, I could have been saying, well, I'm just going to wait for these lungs, or I'm going to wait to get listed, but I would have missed out on so much. And because I said to myself, like, no, your second chance already started, but you made it out of the hospital. That's where your second chance started. Because they thought I was going to die when I first went in. I wasn't expected to even leave the hospital. But after 8 days, they allowed me to leave. And, that's where the second chance started. I got a second chance to breathe outside air. I got a second chance to be outside of that hospital, because I could have very well died inside of the walls of that hospital. And I'm glad that I'm so fortunate and grateful that I recognized that, because yes, I went into a very deep depression for like 5 days. I didn't even leave the bed. And then I got out of that.
How did you
started realizing
when you were in that depression for the time you were, how did you dig yourself out, if I may ask?
I wouldn't want to say it was a coincidence, because I don't believe in that, but I was in a bed for 5 days. I didn't eat. I didn't really drink anything. I kind of, I don't know. I think I wanted to die. And then it's just something that happened. That my daughter popped her head in the room, and she just said, "I love you, Dad."
And that was the
she left.
turnaround.
She went to school, and I said to myself, if I don't get out of this bed, I'm never going to get out of this bed. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I went out. I got out of the bed, and I went downstairs and happened to turn on the TV, and it was on one of the sports channels. And there was a documentary type program on about a basketball player for the Los Angeles Lakers with HIV. And I just happened to turn it on right at the part where he's talking about after he got diagnosed. And he said, we left the doctors, and I went home, and I just went and laid down. And he said, I didn't get out of that bed for 5 days. And immediately, what? I've been in the bed for 5 days. I just got out of the bed. And he said that, that his wife had come in and said, hey, if you don't get out of that, what are you going to do here? And he goes, what am I supposed to do? I'm a basketball player. That's all I know. And she said, that's not all you are. That's a part of who you are. But if you don't get out of that bed, you're not going to figure out the other parts of you. And so he got out of the bed, and he started figuring out the other parts of himself. And when he was speaking it was like he was talking to me through the TV. And it was like he was telling me, you need to go figure out who you are. You're not just a stonemason. It's a part of who you are, but it's not all of who you are. And I had to figure out how to be a warrior. And I had to figure out how to be a dad without being a provider or a protector anymore. And it wasn't just me fighting a diagnosis. It was me fighting the person that led me to this place. And if I didn't fight this person and put him to sleep, I would never get to the version that I'm supposed to be. And it started out as a medical journey, but if I'm being honest here, to present day, it's been a total transformational journey that started with my body and made me realize that my soul and my spirit and my mind were not strong enough. And the only way back was to first strengthen my spirit and my soul, and then my mind would follow that. And eventually, like the body always does, follows in obedience. It's been a 14-year journey from diagnosis to present day. It's been a 13-year journey on my transplants.
And how you doing now?
I can honestly say that this is the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm healthy. I'm not just healthy in my body, but I'm healthy in my mind and healthy in my soul and my spirit. Those are things that I can't say were ever the case, all three of them at the same time. And those are the three parts that God makes us up: a body, mind, and soul. And if we don't strengthen each equally, then we don't have the strongest whole possible.
Now, what's the name of your book again? And you say it's coming out anytime here in November, right?
Just breathe and believe. Because
breathe
in life,
and believe.
In life, if we don't believe in what we're doing, or that we can do the things that we're facing, if we don't believe that in our minds and in our hearts, how's it ever going to happen? And if we do believe that, we've won more than half the battle, because the actual physical act of it is not the hardest part. That is the body following orders, moving in obedience like it always does. So how can that be the hardest part? The hardest part is believing that we're capable of it, whatever that it is.
And it's it's really amazing how some little things sometimes and some major things that go into our life motivate us into changing entirely from where we were maybe before. So sometimes I guess you can say the transplants or the bumps in the road are actually blessings, because it helps us move on just a little better.
Oh, very much so. Like, you know, when they first told me you're dying, Mark, and the only thing that will save you is a double lung transplant, it was the worst news I had ever got in my life. But had I become the why me guy or the poor me guy, I would have missed all the blessings and the lessons that were wrapped up in there, because I would have been too busy feeling sorry for myself, or blaming the world, or blaming God, or, you know, all the things that we do when things go wrong in our life. Instead of looking in the mirror and saying, hey, buddy, you know, this is on you. And until we take accountability for where we're at in life, then we can't heal from life interrupted. And if we can't heal, then we can't grow. And if we can't grow, then we can't evolve. And our main purpose in life is to create and evolve. And when our creations get in the way of the second part of that, we have to deal with that.
Well, this is actually a good episode for anybody who may be waiting for a transplant or they have another illness, because I think, you know, what you're
so
teaching
many
is
hills that are out there. And for anybody that's listening, that's waiting, just don't sit there and say when. Don't say when. Don't be asking that, or why. Ask yourself how. How do I prepare myself for this? And every day that it doesn't happen, you take advantage of it and say, that's one more day for me to prepare for when it does happen. Don't say like, I'm waiting forever, or because that your mind will run away with itself if you go that way. If you say, okay, this is one more day for preparation, and it's all going to happen when God says so anyway. So when he finds that perfect match and he takes that perfect match and leads them by the hand to you, that's when it happens. But until then, you're in preparation. Now, you could look at it one or two ways. You could look at it like I'm preparing, or you could look at it like, you know, when is this ever going to happen? Or is this ever going to happen? And then that you start like introducing doubt, and then fear, and all these other things that don't belong in there. So you're just preparing for the test. It's like you're studying for the test, or you're in practice for the biggest game of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it that way, like people used to ask me, do you get frustrated waiting? And I say, no. Well, how? Like, well, you know, whenever God says it's time, then it'll be time. And each day that it's not time is one more day for me to prepare myself for this. And you know, like I always thought, like, how come I never got nervous before these 12-hour surgeries to save my life? And there's always this little natural bit of nerves that takes place, you know, before you go do this big thing, or before the big game, or whatever. But if it continues on, it's because you weren't prepared. If you're nervous before the test, it's because you didn't study. If you're nervous about the game, it's because you didn't practice, or you didn't game plan, or you didn't know your opponent. And then, of course, you're never going to do well, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all in preparation. And that's how you get through that wait. because when you are waiting, it's like, it's weird because time is fast and slow at the same time. It's like, it seems like forever for a week to go by, but all of a sudden then a whole month is gone. And then when you're waiting for an opportunity at more time, whoo, man, you gotta exercise a lot of patience, and you have to really just focus on anything that's positive, anything at all, because if you start focusing on one little negative thing, that thing spreads like wildfire, and then before you know it, you're like, why am I even doing this?
I myself try to be a very positive person, but with each battle, sometimes you're going, not again, or, oh, just when I thought everything was going good. And you kind of try to, you don't try, but you kind of drift back. And I always tell people sometimes, just give me a day or two and I'll have myself out of it. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to dig yourself out of it. It's like you said, you got to keep that positive attitude. And
it really is what you tell yourself. It really is what you tell yourself. You could say, oh, here we go again, or, okay, let's do this. I'm ready. In this life that we live, this transplant life, there's no time for getting ready.
Mm-hmm.
You have to stay ready. That way you don't have to worry about getting ready, because things can change at the drop of a dime.
Oh,
you could be doing great, and that's just happened to me, where I'm doing great. I feel like Superman. Then I got to go to the clinic visit, and out of a clinic visit, they're like, we got to admit you. Wait a minute, I just felt like Superman. Now I'm being admitted. And that's the way this thing can change at the drop of a dime. So you can't, you can't never say, well, I have time to get ready. You don't have time to get ready. You have to stay ready. But way you stay ready is being prepared. Stay in preparation. When things are going good, don't get like lazy. Don't get lax. Stay in preparation, because things will change. The reality of it is this transplant life is like a roller coaster.
Oh, no kidding.
And it's up and down and up and down. And so you pretty much have to stay in preparation for that free fall. And when you're up, you can't get too up. Just like when you're down, you can't stay down too long. It's more about consistency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're faced with something else, you're like, okay, I'm a seasoned veteran by now, or I'm a warrior. And it's what you tell yourself. Or you could say, oh, not this again. How am I going to do this? Or you could say, I'm a warrior. I was built for this. I'm made for this. Let's do this. And that's what I had to do when I had a fall in the fall of 2015. I had a fall that caused a pulmonary embolism the size of a nickel. That's what led me to my second transplant. And something that should have killed me within days, I was now getting close to battling for 6 months. But every day it was a battle. I'd have to look in the mirror and say, Mark, you're built for this. You're made for this battle. I know nobody thinks you can do this, but you can do it. If anyone can do it, you can do it. And this was a conversation that I had with myself every day in the mirror, pretty much.
Well, awesome stuff. That's for sure. And now
it felt like I was lying to myself, but I really wasn't. I was placing myself in my future existence, in my future self. And that's what we have to understand, is the power in our words. They could be your poison or they could be your power. And when you're in a tough situation, when you're sick, you're challenged medically, your health is compromised, whatever it is, like, you really have to focus on anything positive, and you can't let anything negative come out of you, because your body is always listening, just like the universe is always listening. But your body and the universe, they operate on their own set of rules. They're not our rules.
That's for sure.
And the answer to everything is yes.
How are you? Now, I know, I'm almost positive I know what you're going to say, especially with your attitude and the way you work in life. But so how are you doing today?
like I said, one of the first things I said was, God woke me up again this morning, so I'm off to a great start. And even when I have a challenging day, I say, hey, well, I find gratitude in it because I say, well, at least I'm still here to face these challenges. See, being grateful is the answer to everything. If you're angry, find something to be grateful very long. If you're anxious, you're in anxiety, find something to be grateful for. You won't be in anxiety very long. If you're stressed out, find something to be grateful, because you can't be in two places at the same time. The lights can't be on and off at the same time, just like the water. So if you're feeling a certain way and it's negative, find something to be grateful for, and it will take you out of that space immediately.
Well, I appreciate your time today, Mark, and some good insight. That's for sure. There's not a doubt about that.
It's been my honor and my privilege to be able to share all these things with you and all the listeners, and just to be here. You know what I mean? Like, just the gift of time. Because we always say, well, we have time. I'll do it next week. But we lie to ourselves. One of the biggest lies we tell ourselves is that we have time. And the other biggest lie we tell ourselves is that energy is always going to be there. You know, and it's not. And so we have to stop wasting our energy and stop wasting our time and be good to ourselves, love ourselves. That leads to self-care, that leads to self-respect. And if we have all those things, then we have no problem having self-discipline. And that's how we get through these battles that seem like they're so big and make us feel like we're so small. Finding the positives in everything. Because when you do that, you continually raise your vibration. And you move yourself away from, like, let's be honest, this world is negative everywhere. And you don't even have to go very far to find it. You have to search really hard to find the positives. But when you focus on that, that's what grows. Whatever you focus on is what will grow. Whatever you don't focus on will shrink and eventually die. And that's why I tell everybody, starve your fears and doubts to the point that they die. When they die, bury them. Don't feed them. And then when they become monsters and they're controlling you and you can't function, then we become the why me guy. No, that's not the way it works. You know, like, face your fears and don't doubt yourself ever, because there's thousands of people out there that will doubt you. Why do you want to become one of them?
Good philosophy.
It's this self-sabotage thing we have to stop. We have to stop beating ourselves up in a world that you're guaranteed to get beat up. Stop getting in line to help out. And when we do these things, we see, like, how powerful we really are. And our struggles and our suffering will reveal our strengths, our talents, our gifts, and our skills that we never knew we had. But if we quit, we're never going to get to that place. And the only time you truly lose in life, like truly, truly lose, is when you quit, because there's no coming back from that. For me, I'm just learning, or I'm pivoting, or I'm finding a new road to the greatness that God has for me. I never lose, because I never quit. And warriors will never quit. Warriors always win because we always fight.
No kidding.
And that's the difference.
I think that's a lot of us transplant patients. We refuse to give up and we fight through.
And that's what we do. That's what we do. Literally, that's what we do. And with every battle we face, we're setting an example for many, many people. And so however we move, we have to realize not only are we watching ourselves, but many other people are watching us as well. And when we share our stories, or when we show that example of being that warrior, of embracing that mindset and that spirit and moving in that manner, we unconsciously give people permission to begin to tell their story, to begin to heal, to begin their first steps in their battle or their journey. That's a lot of people are waiting for that. They don't know how to do it. And so our story only matters when we share it. If we're only talking about surviving, that is not good enough. And I'm going to tell this to every transplant person out there. If you're talking about surviving, that's not good enough, because eventually it becomes a sob story and nobody wants to hear it because everybody has one. The only reason your story matters and will have an impact is if you thrive after you survive. What did you do when life knocked you down? Because if you're just talking about getting back up only to get knocked down again, that means you're just getting beat up. What did you do when you stood up? Did you start swinging back? Did you fight? Did you hold your ground? Did you say, you're not going to knock me down again because I'm going to stand a different way? Did you have the courage to change, to be able to stand a different way so you won't get knocked down again? Did you fight back? Because you're only a warrior if you fight back. You're not a warrior if you just get knocked down and then stand back up. You're just a person getting beat up. And you can't keep getting beat up and be okay. We have to, when your back's against the wall, what do? Do we fold in the fetal position and curl up in a ball and feel sorry for ourselves and quit? Or do we bounce off of that wall and start fighting and swinging back? That's the definition. And every person is faced with that. Every person is faced with that, whether you're sick or you're healthy, you're rich or you're poor. We're all faced with this because we're all warriors innately. It just takes different things to bring it out of us. And many are called, but few are chosen. And we have to remember that. And even fewer answer, you know what I mean? Fewer answer that call. But when it's for your life, that's the biggest battle you'll ever be in. And we have to realize you're not just fighting this for us, for me. Like for me, if it would have been just about me, I don't know. I might have laid down and said, I'm good, man, I've had enough. But it wasn't about me. It was more about all the people around me more than it was about me in the end. Because I truly felt like I was teaching my daughter the last lesson I'd ever teach her in our lives together, and that's to fight no matter what, no matter how big the problem is, no matter what you're facing, you keep fighting, you never quit.
All right. Thanks a lot for your time. I much appreciate it.
I'm just so honored to be able to spend this time with you and be able to share my story, because I know it will help somebody. And I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the work that you're doing to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Mark, for your incredible story and also for sharing with us how to stay positive in life after transplantation. Join us next week for another touching episode of Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. If you have a transplant story you'd like to share, reach out to us at giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Once again, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. We would so much like to get your story on our podcast. Follow us on Facebook, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. And until next time, I'm B.J. Odom. Thank you so much for being a part of our journey, reminding us all to appreciate each and every day and let us cherish the extraordinary gift of life.